Hello, this is Leah Cardos, and this is an analysis of David Bowie's song Black Star, which is from his album Black Star from 2016. I'm actually going to read the entirety of Chapter 8 because Chapter 8 is just one big analysis, so sorry for the really long video, but I can't pull the analysis out of this one. Alright, let's go. Black Star begins with its first single, Black Star, released on the 19th of November 2015. Originally more than 11 minutes long, it was pragmatically cut to 9 minutes 57 seconds to conform to the iTunes policy of singles not exceeding 10 minutes. Black Star is gothic and arcane, one of Bowie's most memorable and darkly beautiful compositions. Its perfumed textures and dense atmospherics feel reminiscent of the shadowy sound worlds of One Outside and Heathen, albums that share similarly mortal, paranoid, parareligious themes. The lyric is elusive and loaded with potent imagery that could tease interpretive pathways towards cosmology, alchemy, TV shows, sun deities, science fiction, hermeticism, and more. The accompanying music video, devised by Bowie and directed by Johan Renck, is pure dark sci-fi, loaded with numinous symbolism. It presents the artist alternately as a trembling blind man, the bandaged button eyes, a religious leader and a grinning trickster, and it strongly hints at Major Tom's fate, a skeleton in a spacesuit, his bejeweled skull used as a relic in a strange ritual. Taken together, Black Star is an epic presentation, and for anyone wishing to attempt a reading, a juicy prospect. Black Star's tempos are in the A1 section 130 beats per minute, in the B section 98 beats per minute, and that continues in the A2 section also. The tonalities are B Phrygian dominant mode in the A sections, F sharp major in the B section, and the form is a simple ABA ternary form. The music is structurally, stylistically, and sonically adventurous, moving between two contrasting sections that are differentiated by key, tempo, arrangement, and performance style. The pieces are arranged in ternary ABA, similar to Bowie's other long-form tracks that incorporate dramatic shifts in energy and tone within the single piece. Sweet Thing Candidate, Sweet Thing Reprise, 1974, and Station to Station, 1976. The first section is built on a harmonic progression that subtly shifts between B and C major, calling to mind the exoticism of Middle Eastern scale modes, and is reminiscent of Radiohead's hypnotic Kid A opener, Everything in Its Right Place. Bowie uses a Phrygian dominant mode in these sections. Phrygian mode is like a standard natural minor scale, only with a flattened second degree. Phrygian dominant mode, also known as Phrygian major, Phrygish or Spanish Phrygian, has an additional raised third, making the root chord major. The characteristic Phrygian modal effect is associated with flamenco music and folk melodies like Hava Nagila and Miserlou. Bowie uses a Phrygian dominant mode in these sections. In this instance, it reliably summons something dark and strange, as it does in New Cologne 1977, and also in the verses of No Control and I'm Deranged 1995. The tonality has the darkness of minor in the changes, but the openness of major in the resolution. Shadows and moonlight. Bowie's melody delivers the lyric in a style suggestive of prayer. Serene, repetitive, focusing on single notes in the style of sacred benediction or magical incantation. Made even more numinous by a pitch manipulation effect that copies the vocal a perfect fifth higher, suggesting the rigid parallel movement of Gregorian chant. The end of the phrase remains uncomfortably resolved, terminating on A, artificially harmonized with E with the vocal effect, in a haze of frozen reverb and delay, while the band resolves to B major. The composition repeatedly underlines "your eyes" with these troublesome notes, a splinter in the phrase "something doesn't fit." A trend in Bowie's melody writing where the phrase lands on a dissonant note teasingly denies a resolution, like in this line from Stay, and also this line from Heat.
My father and the prison.
Underneath these musical elements, the arrangement is a brooding textural expanse made up of McCaslin's low flute tones, Jason Lindner's keyboards, a stable of Wurlitz's, Prophets and Moogs, and Ben Monder's guitar sounding like a celestial harp. Mark Juliana's impatient drumming moves between a contained, stuttering beat and a more driven, propulsive groove, reminiscent again of One Outside's No Control. With the rhythmic shift feeling like a barrier being pushed through, tilting the energy from hesitation to anticipation and then back again. McCaslin's saxophone appears at first in nimble, swirling tendrils, leading to a brief solo that climbs up from its knees and hits the roof at the top of the octave. The solo summons a subtle shift in the mix at 2 minutes 16, which opens up a brighter clarity above 10 kHz that can be heard in the hi-hats, bringing the whole scene into sharper focus. As the section progresses, Bowie's voice picks up strange spatial effects that spark and bounce off specific lyrics, heady clouds of reverb and refracting echo tails that lay on thick and dissipate just as quickly. At approximately 3 minutes 55, a spectral, a day in the life style segue stitches this section to the next, leading the way with McCaslin's barking sax fixatedly poking at the unresolved sonority that has haunted the entire section. The drums disappear, collapsing under murky atmospherics, and Bowie's voices trace an outline similar to the section's main theme, still uncomfortably lacking resolution, with an unnaturally eerie charge due to the sound being partially reversed. The musical transition dramatizes this moment like the arrival of a spiritual apparition after fevered supplication. The second B section of the song transposes the action to the dominant F-sharp major, brightening the scene with smooth, gospel-style changes emerging from the fog like rays of light, floating effortlessly down F-sharp, C-sharp over E-sharp, E, G-sharp minor over D-sharp, B minor over D, F-sharp over C-sharp. That progression is familiar to the ear of anyone versed in 1960s era pop and soul, and it comes as a musical relief, dissolving the tension built up from the first section. That progression is similar to Someday at Christmas by Stevie Wonder, but it also shares this quality with Baby Love by The Supremes, You Make Me Feel Like a Natural Woman by Carole King and Jerry Goffin, sung by Aretha Franklin.
Looking out on the morning rain, I used to feel so uninspired, and when I knew,
and Mary France by Jean-Jacques Perry. Bowie's voice is higher, his delivery sweeter, even as the lyrics become strangely troubling. Big promises and puffed up self-aggrandizement, leading to assertions of personal power as the Black Star. The music gathers up some R&B swagger when Bowie sings I Can't Answer Why, riffing between C7 and C-sharp with a low soul band sax section and sharp rhythm guitar backbeat smacking with spring reverb. The lead voice is joined in call and response with the harmonized prayer voice from the previous section. These repetitive background declarations of I'm a Black Star have an uncanny edge. Where in the past, Bowie's vari-speed pitch experiments on the voice can imply the breakdown of sanity or a shifted reality, here the deformed, signal-processed voice sounds dazed and assimilated. A compliant, brainwashed voice. A short chromatic slide from C# to C and then B, and the music pivots effortlessly to the Phrygian dominant territory of the start for the reprise of the A section at 7 minutes 23. This reprise feels familiar, but for these differences. The leading voice is now altered, tamed and exhausted, and the music has a slightly slower tempo, pinned down by a minimal zombie drum beat. The syncopated bass helplessly locked in. No more energy, no more anticipation. Whatever was prayed for in the first section and answered in the second has observably, at least musically and sonically, altered the third. As the music ambles to its conclusion, the machine starts to fall apart. The shambolic discipline of the bass and drums slacken to a rough stop. Flutes and sax, guitar and keyboard instruments quietly and erratically jabber as they disperse. From the accounts of the band and production team, we know that Black Star was one of the last songs to be tracked with the band during the third round of Magic Shop sessions in March 2015. But it was the first that Bowie laid his final vocal takes on, a job that took 2 days to complete, which is unusual for him. Final vocals, next day aside, were often done in only 1 or 2 takes. Similarly, this was the track that engineer Tom Elmhurst mixed first. Its extended length proved to be a challenge, taking him 2 days to get a handle on the composition's unique structural tensions. Assistant engineer Aaron Tonkin likened the structural approach of Black Star to that of a film, with subtle production choices helping to provide continuity and cohesion. The application of spatial effects in the production of Bowie's vocal leads the cinematic storytelling through the song, never applied as a blanket treatment, but used in a painterly way to highlight specific phrases. The effects illuminate and refract specific words. The effects also separate the characters attached to Bowie's differentiated vocal performances, giving them a unique and recognizable patina. For instance, the heavenly leading voice at 4 minutes 41, sitting within pillowy light delays, rubbing against the differently textured background vocals at 4:55, then shifting to a more sinister lyrical territory with a brittle, edgier sound at 5 minutes 23. The cryptic lyrics afford the curious listener several avenues of interpretation. Certainly, after the event of Bowie's death, the temptation to try and decode the song and its video to unearth symbolic meanings was irresistible to many. When Bowie claims to be the Black Star, what might he be referring to? Is it another name for a cancerous lesion, a black hole, a reference to Saturnian astrology, a Jungian or alchemical shadow, a temporal plot device from a Star Trek episode, or did it refer to a big day of gangland assassination in Peaky Blinders?
It's the day we take out Billy Kimber and his men.
And what of this mysterious villa of Orman? The draft lyric sheet for Black Star that was added to the touring V&A show when it arrived at the Brooklyn Museum shows the original draft referred to a villa of all men, before being changed at some point in the process. Perhaps a reference to collective humanity, or deliberately singling out all men in opposition to only women from the same verse. A separation that is reflected in the video where the ritual participants are all female and the sacrificed individuals are all male. Scholar Alec Charles suggests the near homophonous all men could be read as a site of androgyny of women or men. This new tidbit of information arrived long after fans and commentators had mined the word ormen, serpent in Norwegian, for every speck of meaning. Tales of Viking longships and grisly punishments to serpent myths from creation and the Ouroboros. In a track that seems so loaded with symbols, on an album with a title that is itself made up of symbols, it's easy to get carried away trying to crack the code. Yet the primary images contained in the composition, eyes, stars, supplication, transformation, might afford listeners a way in and an opportunity to find footing in the song's mysterious world. It was Aleister Crowley, or the entity Aiwass, which he claimed was speaking through him, who said, "Every man and every woman is a star." Echoed 66 years later when Joni Mitchell affirmed to her generation, "We are stardust." And a decade after that when Carl Sagan agreed that we are all made of star stuff, 1980. The materials of our bones, blood and DNA originating from the interiors of collapsing stars.
The cosmos is also within us. We're made of star stuff. We are a way for the cosmos to know itself.
Black holes, like the rest of us, are born from stars too. In the complex storyline constructed, presumably after the fact, around the rise and fall of Ziggy Stardust and the spiders from Mars, Ziggy became a rock star himself in the process of delivering a message of hope from alien starmen to doomed humanity, only to be destroyed on stage, torn apart by the hands of his fans. This narrative grew more complex the following year when Bowie had developed the story further towards a possible theatre piece. The Starmen are actually an alien race called the Infinites, black hole jumpers who traverse the paths of dead stars. The twist, Ziggy was the dead star they wanted, and fame caused his star to explode. Dying on stage actualizes his transformation to a black hole, hastening the Infinite's material appearance on Earth. The star as metaphor for human potential and hubris, corrupting and incorruptible, desirable and dangerous, is one that Bowie returns to repeatedly in his work. But there are stars and then there are stars. The new star that he discovered in your eyes, for instance? Or the sleepless celebrity vampires watching you from behind tinted windows of stretched limousines? The itemized list of different stars in the Black Star lyric draws conscious attention to the star lore that already exists in Bowie's catalogue. It also sets up the idea that this Black Star character is, at least claiming to be, more powerful and evolved than any other star you could think to mention. There is a subtle difference between black holes and black stars. A black hole is a star that has collapsed under its own weight to the point that not even light can escape the force of its own gravity. A black star refers to a gravitational object that's similar to a black hole, but still contains matter. A collapsed star that may be transitioning towards singularity, not possessing an observable event horizon or threshold point of no return, not yet the big nothing, as there is still detectable light that can escape the object. And there are mysteries within it, theoretically, such as quantum energy, quarks and particles, creative potentials. Theorists predict that towards the center of a black star there are strange new laws governing space and time. Thinking pragmatically, the fact that a black star is a thing and not a mysterious gaping nothing makes it easier to represent as an image. Another enduring theme in Bowie's songwriting is space travel, which is often associated with ideas of lone adventure, isolation, decline, mental illness and transformation. Major Tom, the fictional astronaut from Bowie's first hit, 1969's Space Oddity, came to exemplify these connected themes with his Hero Quest, encapsulating Bowie's oeuvre from 1969 to 2016, the entirety of his journey as a star on Earth. After being launched on a mission into space, Major Tom becomes disconnected from earthly communications and surrenders navigation to his spaceship, says his farewells to his wife and, from this point, presumably continues onwards on an open-ended adventure. A decade later in Ashes to Ashes, 1980, we learn that Major Tom has developed troubling addictions and has hit his all-time lowest point while traversing galactic voids. Though he's not referenced explicitly in a lyric again, not counting Neil Tennant's additional lines in the remixed version of Hello Spaceboy from 1995, Major Tom is a suggested presence in the music video for Slow Burn, 2002. And again as the dead astronaut Skull Relic in the video for Black Star, with his corpse seen reclining in a picturesque, otherworldly landscape later floating headless towards an eclipse. Of course, Space Oddity took some inspiration from Stanley Kubrick's film 2001: A Space Odyssey in 1968, which explores themes of humanity's relationship with technology and the universe, following its protagonist, Dr. David "Dave" Bowman, played by Keir Dullea, as he and his team investigate mysterious alien monoliths that have appeared throughout the solar system. At the climax of the film, Bowman's pod is pulled into a black hole that acts as a portal and shows him travelling through a surreal vortex of colour, streaking flashing lights, and strange planetary landscapes. Before he vanishes through the portal, Mission Control hears his final words. The infamous Stargate sequence is intercut with scenes of stars exploding, going supernova, and close-up shots of Bowman's eyes, suggesting that the multidimensional travel is affecting him inwardly as well as outwardly. Ultimately, Bowman is irrevocably changed by this experience, reborn into the form of a new celestial being, the fetal star child, naked and wrapped in utero-light energy, eyes wide open. Interestingly, the handwritten Black Star lyric drafts added to the David Bowie Is exhibition in 2018 show some of the rejected lyrics from the B section of the song, declaring what he isn't, not a no-show, fallback, or black mark, and what he is, a sun star, a blade star. Keeping with the sci-fi theme, it's perhaps a trivial coincidence that Bowie's 69th and last birthday, the 8th of January 2016, was also the inception date, birthday, of anti-hero and Nexus 6 replicant Roy Batty, played by Rutger Hauer from Blade Runner 1982. In a tantalizing what might have been scenario, Bowie was the first choice of director Denis Villeneuve to star as the antagonist Neander Wallace in the sequel, Blade Runner 2049. We know that Bowie was a fan of the original film, as the tribute wreath he sent to the funeral of his half-brother Terry quoted Batty's Tears in Rain monologue. This shared birth-release inception could be nothing more than a happy synchronism, but it opens a channel of pleasing resonance. The Black Star Project arriving on Bowie's birthday, so close to his death day, while on some parallel fictional plane, Batty is born, starting his short journey to fight for the extension of his lifespan, ultimately destined to fail but not before confronting his creator. It was Terry who turned his brother onto jazz at a young age, playing him Mingus, Coltrane and Dolphy, as well as instigating Bowie's lifelong interests in Tibetan Buddhism, science fiction, Beat Generation literature, soul music and R&B. It was these shared enthusiasms for jazz and R&B that led Bowie to pick the alto saxophone as his instrument, and you can hear how these foundational music inspirations seeped into Bowie's songwriting. From jazz, he took modal effects, lopsided time signatures, elastic form and structure, and a will to extend the boundaries of pop and rock music and create space for improvisation and experimentation. From R&B came catchy hooks and danceable rhythms, keyboards and horn sections adding swagger to everything from Heroes to Tin Machine to Earthling. He added Mike Garson's avant-garde jazz-inspired style to the high glam sound of the Spiders, most dramatically heard in the genre-smashing free improv centerpiece piano solo in Aladdin Sane. From the Ziggy era onwards, Bowie would also begin, tentatively and sporadically, integrating his own sax playing into his projects. From the layered section work on Soul Love, Ziggy Stardust, and the soul-inspired solo from Sorrow, for Pin-Ups, to the avant-jazz Subterraneans from 1977. Low album, but originally composed for the aborted The Man Who Fell to Earth soundtrack. He was one of the first white artists to record at Sigma Sound Studios in Philadelphia, the birthplace of Philly Soul, also associated with Gamble and Huff's influential PIR label, a vital precursor to disco, and would eventually innovate new rock fusions that combined American soul, funk, disco elements with European music styles like glam, motoric, and early electronica. With his powerhouse rhythm section, all musicians of color, Carlos Alomar, George Murray, and Dennis Davis in the late 70s. In 1975, Bowie was the second white singer after Elton John to appear on the landmark American dance music show Soul Train, exposing his sound to new non-rock audiences and propelling soul-inspired tracks Fame and Golden Years to the top of the charts. With the help of disco pioneer Nile Rodgers, he would finally break through to mainstream megastardom with the funk-inspired Let's Dance, and, that same year, publicly called out MTV for not programming black music videos.
I'm just floored by the fact that there's so few black artists featured.
Like most white music stars, Bowie took heavy inspiration from black music cultures that paid huge commercial dividends, though one gets the sense that he never did so in the spirit of concealment or outright theft. Bowie was in a love affair with black American music from the very start. Both Black Star and the 2014 single version of Sue or In a Season of Crime stand in the catalogue as the fullest expressions of Bowie's love of jazz. Ron Hart would comment that these late choices to work with jazz musicians pushing the genre itself deeper and deeper into the 21st century is perhaps his greatest gift back to the genre. Black Star is surely positioned to rekindle the relationship between jazz and rock in the same way Kendrick Lamar's To Pimp a Butterfly reunited the craft with hip-hop. Assistant engineer Aaron Tonkin remembers that Lamar's 2015 album was listened to all the way through from start to finish with David in the studio, along with D'Angelo's Black Messiah. She told me he was just blown away and so inspired by that music. Tony Visconti would add, "We loved the fact that Kendrick was so open-minded and he didn't do a straight-up hip-hop record. He threw everything on there, and that's exactly what we wanted to do. The goal in many ways was to avoid rock and roll." Following his death, Black Star stormed the charts and Bowie became the #1 artist in the world. Within 2 weeks, there would be 12 of his albums in the UK Top 40, a feat that no other artist had accomplished aside from Elvis Presley following his death in 1977. Like all young musicians of the 1950s, Bowie grew up in the ubiquitous shadow of the king, cribbing plenty of his stage moves and makeup tips. In the 1970s, the pair shared a record label, RCA, and there were rumours of would-be collaborations between the star label mates. Bowie's 1975 hit Golden Years was apparently offered to Presley, who declined. The iconic Aladdin Sane lightning bolt makeup was inspired by Presley's TCB, Taking Care of Business logo, and also by the logo of an old rice cooker in album photographer Brian Duffy's studio. In a 1997 interview with Q magazine, Bowie spoke about their coincidental birthdays and how he once thought it might have some manner of cosmic provenance. Quote, "I couldn't believe it. He was a major hero of mine, and I was probably stupid enough to believe that having the same birthday as him actually meant something." Bowie could have been playing with these connections by referencing one of Presley's obscure cuts, Black Star, from 1960. Originally intended to be the title track for a film of the same name, the song was retitled Flaming Star and re-recorded when the film project was also renewed. Written by Sid Wayne and Sherman Edwards, the song is sung from the perspective of a character who wishes he could bargain with death for more time. The star that the protagonist can sense over his shoulder is death itself.
Black star, don't shine on me.
Presley's ambiguous relationship with black culture was also something that Bowie thought about in the context of his own work. Ian Penman reflected on this when he interviewed Bowie in 1995 for Esquire. Quote, "We were talking about his great watershed album, Young Americans, and he said something very sane and economical about it. Yeah, it was like, how do you give the white man's soul without pretending to be a black man? The very thing he was so often criticized for, being the great pretender, was, in fact and in essence, the one thing he wasn't. But the query he put to himself, how do you give the white man's soul, vibrated at other frequencies. This was also the time of cocaine, Crowley, Caucasian messiah complexes. Occultism and surrealism both use symbols to engage different levels of consciousness, to penetrate the mysteries and facilitate creativity through the disruption, expansion, or destruction of the confines of rational thinking. While it can take various subversive shapes, based on different texts and traditions, in the forms that found new popularity in the 1960s, it mirrored surrealism's engagement with the subconscious and unconscious, with its faith in the power of dream and trance images, and in the stream of words uncensored by the intellect. Bowie's songwriting engaged creatively with these esoteric concepts at various points in his career. At the level of intellectual curiosity on The Man Who Sold the World, Hunky-Dory, and later in Station to Station, where fully immersed in occult activities and on the brink of full-blown cocaine psychosis, Bowie was reportedly painting sigils on the walls of his Los Angeles home, concocting hexes, chanting spells, and generally losing his grip on reality. There is also a curious tension between art, identity, and authenticity emerging during this period. Bowie is engaging warmly with black music culture, while at the same time embodying the shadow figure of the Thin White Duke, his icy Aryan aura seemingly at odds with the funk and soul-inspired music he was producing at the time. It is the Duke that sings about flashing no colour and making sure white stains, longing to be connected with love yet feeling nothing at all, settling for a cold embrace with the dark side of his Europeanness. In Black Star, there is a curious line about seeing right, with eagles, daydreams, and diamonds in his eyes, which has a slight unsettling whiff of right-wing American freedom rhetoric and Nazi imagery. Whoever this self-proclaimed Black Star is, he's making big promises and not providing clear answers. He can't answer why, you just have to trust him. He's going to take you home and confine you there without shoes or a passport. Your life is not worth that much anyway. You're a flash in the pan. He is the great I am. In this part of the song, the lyrics suggest that the heavenly, crooning voice is confidently seducing others into a dark and dangerous belief system. Imagery associated with notorious English magician and poet Aleister Crowley appears from time to time in Bowie's work. Crowley can be linked to the Kabbalist symbolism in Station to Station, the scribbles on the wall of the famous Shapiro portraits from 1975, and specific ritual poses in Bowie's imagery and performances. For example, the overhanded floor touch move, performed in many music videos, was a signification of the magical movement from Kether to Malkuth on the Kabbalistic Tree of Life, pulling heaven down to earth. The Tree of Life is a diagram used in some mystical traditions, Jewish and Hermetic Kabbalah, also adapted within Crowley's system of Thelema. It consisted of 10 interconnected spheres or nodes called Sephiroth, representing aspects of reality, or God's creation, organized into a structural hierarchy with pathways of movement in between. The movement that goes from Kether, the crown or the Godhead, the primordial energy of creation, to Malkuth, earth or the physical realm, describes a journey from the highest to the lowest of the Sephiroth. This symbolic act mirrored Bowie's personal philosophy as an artist. Quote, "I'm actually very 19th century, a born romantic. Unlike Brian, who's terminally end of 20th century, Brian is someone who will take things from low art and elevate them to high art, whereas I do precisely the opposite. I'll take things from high art and demean them down to street level." The lyrical repetition of the line at the center of it all, as a few commentators, including Nicholas Pegg, have pointed out, has a familiarity with Crowley's Star of Sapphire ritual. Let him return to the center, and so to the center of all, making the rosy cross as he may know how. Which echoes another lyric from Slow Burn, and here we are at the center of it all. The purpose and specific nature of this ritual are shrouded within obfuscating language in the original text, though the rosy cross likely refers to ritual sex magic. The fundamental symbols of the Rosicrucians were the rose and the cross, the rose female and the cross male exemplifying reproductive processes. The lyric is given its eerie charge by the dark atmosphere of the music and Bowie's invocational delivery, but it is unlikely that the casual listener would register any higher meanings beyond this. The remaining occult references contained in Black Star are made via imagery, the 5-pointed star icon, featured in the album's artwork by designer Jonathan Barnbrook, and the subversion of religious imagery, holy books being held aloft, quaking ritual movements, scarecrows in crucifix pose, contained in the music video. The enigmatic Black Star symbol has been read as a reference to the ancient Egyptian alchemical symbol of the Black Sun, or Sol Niger, the raw material of creation not yet transformed, a symbol that Jung attached to the idea of light and shadow coexisting in consciousness, the synthesis of opposites in alchemy and psychology. The Black Sun is also a name given to a Nazi symbol,
Schwarze Sonne,
commonly seen in propaganda imagery associated with neo-fascists, far-right extremists, and white nationalists. In speaking with Rolling Stone, McCaslin claimed that Bowie had told him the song was about ISIS, Islamic State, leading Spencer Kornhaber in The Atlantic to speculate on how a song about stardom and inflated ego could be connected to the idea of Islamic extremism, quote, and about how indulging one's ego can paradoxically inspire others to forget their own. You can see how radical clerics and suicide bombers fit the dynamic here. The pentagrammic black star icon that appeared on the album's artwork was devised by Barnbrook and, by his account, did not take inspiration from the occult, but rather once again from Russian constructivism, Kazimir Malyevich's Black Square painting. Unveiled in St. Petersburg, Petrograd, in 1915, while the First World War raged, with one Russian revolution in recovery and another brewing, Black Square is precisely what its title suggests it is. A painted black square on a white linen canvas measuring roughly 80 centimeters on each axis. It was purposefully hung in a traditionally venerated position in the gallery that, when translated to a traditional Russian home, would be reserved for Orthodox saints and icons, a site of spiritual significance. Among the many interpretations of the work, it has been said to reflect an impotence and redundancy in its detachment from the forces of life, or convey sheer, surging, untrammeled possibility, the most frightening painting known to man, an image that depicts nothing and nobody. The image became Malyevich's signature motif, an icon representing his identity and enduring legacy. He signed his subsequent paintings with it, and a black square also marks his grave. The Black Star visual concept was designed from the start to be shareable and recognizable in big or small formats. The fact that the five-pointed star icon was already available as a dingbat font meant the album's artwork could be transmitted in a multitude of different forms and easily incorporated into any text. In the end, Barnbrook designed 5 different versions of the star cover, which were subsequently integrated into the inner sleeve booklet design. Each star suggests different meanings, with 8, 12, 16, and 20 points. They look like religious stars, sun symbols, comic book style explosions, and finally, an official seal like one would find on a certificate or diploma, or a price tag. I asked Barnbrook if Bowie came to him with the Black Star visual concept already in hand, and he said, quote, "You asked me if David came forward with the ideas, and he never did, especially with the Next Day and Black Star. His approach was really, how do you respond to this? I'm not going to explain the songs or anything." The different black stars, each one unique and symmetrically perfect, bear some resemblance to the mandalas that Jung obsessively drew and painted in response to his dreaming, driven as he was towards the center of things. The center is the goal, and everything is directed towards that center. A foundational concept in Jung's writing is not only the identification of the I at the center, but a population of I's that make up the total self. Quote, "Inasmuch as the I is only the center of my field of consciousness, it is not identical with the totality of my psyche, being merely a complex among other complexes. In this sense, the self would be an ideal greatness which embraces and concludes the I." The Black Star video, filmed in September 2015, begins with close-ups of an astronaut's suit, opening up to reveal it reclining against rocks in a blue landscape on a remote planet. The scene is dimly lit by a solar eclipse. The suit is old and battered, held together in places with electrical tape. A yellow smiley face patch can be seen on the front, a reference to Gertie, the artificial intelligence from the science fiction film Moon, 2009, written and directed by Bowie's son, Duncan Jones. A young woman with a tail and monobrow approaches the corpse, gently detaches the dead astronaut's jewel-encrusted skull, then delivers it to a nearby town where a group of women have assembled and a ritual is about to commence. The town seems to be lit from the center by a candle that has accumulated a large amount of melted wax, giving the interior scenes a warm glow. We first see Bowie as a panicked blind man with bandaged eyes, who sings the incantational passages from the A section of the song while figures behind him convulse and shake as if possessed. By the second verse, Button Eyes has calmed down somewhat, making slower movements and half smiling as he sings. By the transition to the B section of the song, in the same costume but now without the blindfold, he is seemingly possessed of a different character. Bowie stands resolute with eyes fixed on the distance, holy book held aloft, a symbol of the black star on the cover. Shifting character again, Bowie delivers the contrasting middle section of the song from a church-like attic, under shafts of warm, blurry light. Now the opposite of panicked, his performance is confident and mocking, embodying the archetypal trickster. Nearby, 3 living scarecrows, male, blindfolded with button eyes, are positioned in a grassy field, suggesting the scene of Jesus' crucifixion. The figures writhe and grind as the ritual with the women, who are also shaking like the 3 figures we see behind button eyes in the attic, takes place. Eventually, a surreal-looking monster, a black mass of dreadlocked fur and no face, is summoned. It rushes to attack the scarecrows with its hook, while a heavy storm breaks over the town and Button Eye struggles and falters. The clip ends with a brief flash of Barnbrook's Black Star icon. The collaboration with director Johan Renck on the video for Black Star had a starting point in late July 2015, while the track itself was undergoing finishing touches. It was Renck who initially reached out to the Bowie camp, requesting permission to use his music for the opening theme for Canal Plus and Sky Atlantic's 6-episode crime drama The Last Panthers. Bowie responded with an early, alternate version of the final verse of Black Star, with new keyboard and guitar parts added. Now acquainted as collaborators with shared interests in surrealism and the psychomagical dream realism of directors such as Alejandro Jodorowsky and Andrei Tarkovsky, Bowie worked closely with Renck to produce his final 2 videos, Black Star and Lazarus. The influence of German expressionism is also apparent here in the composition and staging of the exterior scenes. The stylized alien landscape, with its curled edges and 2-dimensional painterly quality, is framed by the eclipse in such a way that suggests the overall shape of an eye. The ancient town lit from the center, with its symmetrical buildings in perspective, call to mind iconic imagery from the silent films of Robert Wiene and Fritz Lang. It's possible that the use of colour in the narrative was similarly inspired by the differently tinted and toned nitrate prints from The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, 1920, as the Black Star video makes use of blue, ochre, amber and green washes to suggest external and internal scenes. The choreography in Black Star was devised by Elke Luyten, who also worked on Lazarus, and her collaborator Kira Alka. Luyten also appears in the video, first as one of the 3 shaking acolytes behind Button Eyes, and later as the volunteer in the ritual who accepts the skull. The eerie, convulsing movement was said to stem from a suggestion made by Bowie connected to the always moving background animations he noticed in a Popeye cartoon. But the movements could also be connected to a similar shaking bunny hop gesture seen in the video for Fashion. In the context of Black Star, it brings an unmistakable, ecstatic religious connotation that suggests Quaker Shaker worship and voodoo ritual. The approach to movement seems to cross-pollinate with the Lazarus video filmed 2 months later, a strangely stiffened dancing style common in both, alongside the reappearance of Button Eyes and the adorned skull on the writer's desk. There is a focus on sight, blindfolds, buttons for eyes, close-ups of eyes sending communicative signals, and at times the audience's view mimics failing senses, partially blurred vision, flaring light, and strange shifts in position as though the viewer has one or the other eye momentarily closed. The eyes at the center of it all hold some significance, and the missing and/or mutilated eye is a potent symbol of surrealist art. Bowie's famously mismatched eyes, the result of a childhood injury, eventually became an iconic symbol of his unusual beauty, individuality, and artistic vision. With one pupil permanently dilated, it meant Bowie saw the world slightly differently, a gift and an impairment. He often used a symbol of the bandaged, blind, or masked man, feeling towards the future in the Time Will Crawl video from 1987. The sectioned man with sensory-style eye bandages in Jump They Say from 1993, a reference to the 1962 experimental film La Jetée. Blindfolded and wrapped up with dead fish as Ramona A. Stone, embodying another photo in Schwartz-Coggler's third action series, From One Outside, the clouded eyes of Heathen, and the accompanying desecrated artworks with their eyes scratched out in homage to death-obsessed photographer Joel Peter Witkin. Nicholas Pegg points out that Bowie had also performed as a blind pilgrim on stage during the Glass Spider Tour's Loving the Alien sequence and in late period live performances of Heathen, The Rays. In 1976, in the alias of the Thin White Duke, Bowie opened his live performances with a cloth mask covering his eyes, after the traditional precursor showing of Dali and Buñuel's eyeball-slicing short, Un Chien Andalou. Here, the buttons sewn into his bandages seem to be mocking his blindness, a symbolic image that Lisa Perrott interprets as a representation of loss of agency. Buttons as eyes is a visual metaphor that Neil Gaiman deploys in his dark fantasy Coraline from 2002, signifying the acceptance of captivity and compliance with the world one finds oneself in. The buttons also echo the Greco-Roman myth of Charon, the ferryman who accepts payment in pennies on the eyes of the dead, holding their eyes shut before taking the deceased to Hades. When the David Bowie Ears archive made its final stop in Brooklyn in 2018, it included new Black Star artifacts, sketches and storyboards under the heading Disunited States of Mind, and prototype drawings of the button-eyes character, one with eyes completely covered, another with the bandage mask slipping off, revealing real eyes underneath. One of these states of mind cannot see what's coming. The image strikes to the heart of our anxieties about death and what comes next, providing a fittingly poetic image of how it feels to not be able to see beyond your own end. There is no knowledge without perception. The big nothing of death is a riddle, for how can we know that there is nothing if we are stripped of all perception and can't see or sense it? Cognition requires an object to observe, and vice versa. Death ends existence and so completes it, but the dead person lacks the ability to appreciate the totality of their life as a whole, in the Heidegger sense. Being diagnosed with life-threatening cancer is a cruel knowledge to receive, a paradoxical trade-off where one is forced to surrender knowledge of the future in exchange for the kind of unnatural knowledge no one would want to possess, when you might expect to die, and how much or little time there is left. It's funny how a terminal deadline gets stuck on your eyes.